welcome back to episode 4 of Boots and Heels. It's really great to have you here. Today, we're going to be looking at whether what you learned in science class about cows and what they produce, whether that's really true about the environment.
We're so glad to have Adam Henson with us here today. He's hopefully going to be shedding some light on, well, as Lizzie said, do cows burping? Is that really going to destroy the planet?
Is it burping as well? I thought it was just pumping. Thank you so much for joining us today, Adam. It's great to have you on the podcast.
It's a delight to be here.
Perfect. So let's kick off then. We have started with some Mythbusters on our podcast this series. So trying to break the stigma and stereotypes within the industry. So today we're going to be talking a little bit about climate change, a bit about the environment, and some myths that are often put onto farmers and looked at from the public perspective. So to start off then, you spend a lot of time speaking publicly about all things farming. You know, you're very open about how you think farming's the best job in the world. So really, where did it all start, Adam?
Yeah, so ever since I was a little boy, really. So my father came from London. He was an actor's son. His father was a guy called Leslie Henson, who was quite a famous actor and comedian. So my dad used to go out and help on a farm as a little boy, sort of on the outskirts of London, fell in love with farming. And then he went to Cirencester Agricultural College, got a farm manager's job, and then eventually took on the farm tenancy here in the Cotswolds in 1962. And I was born here on the farm. So I now live in the tenanted farmhouse that I'm sitting in now. So this is the house that I virtually lived in all my life, where my mum and dad and my three sisters and I lived. And so ever since I was growing up on the farm, I just wanted to be with him, particularly with the livestock, but also out on the arable fields as well. And he used to talk to me and my three sisters in a very adult way and explain to us all about wildlife and conservation and farming and food. And then in 1971, he opened the Cotswold Farm Park, which is his rare breeds tourist enterprise with all our rare farm animals. So, you know, we've got all these rare breeds with farming going on and then people visiting as well with a playground and a sweet shop. So why wouldn't you want to be part of that? And so I went off to agricultural college, traveled the world for a year, and then eventually came home and worked for my dad and his business partner until eventually buying into the partnership and then succeeding the tenancy. And now I run the whole business with a joint director, business partner, friend of mine.
So I have to, sorry, Bex, I was going to say, so traveling all around the world then, you still found that you were rooted back at home. That's where you wanted to be, back on the farm.
Yeah, so, you know, absolutely. I mean, the Cotswolds is a beautiful area to live and work, you know, rolling hills, dry stone walls, beautiful Cotswold villages. The farm isn't particularly productive because we're about 1,000 foot up and quite thin soil. So if I was going to choose a more profitable farm to live on, then I'd need to move somewhere else. But as far as beauty goes, it was lovely. And I had a fantastic childhood here. And so traveling the world, that old adage, there's no place like home. I did want to come home. That was sort of in my mindset, but thoroughly enjoyed getting away and learning from farms in Australia and New Zealand in particular.
I have to say, I haven't done the kind of traveling side of things, but I've been away to work and away to uni and coming back to Yorkshire. I mean, I have to say, I think Yorkshire's better than the Cotswolds, but there is no place like home, and coming back is such a special feeling. And I think we're kind of the lucky ones who have the opportunity to come back and not just call it home, but your place of work. And it doesn't feel like work. I mean, some days do, don't get me wrong. Some jobs very much feel like work, but most of it is easy in some sense because you love it that much.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. You know, if you think about the last 18 months and how difficult that has been, you know, looking out of the window across the other side of this room, I'm looking out onto beautiful green fields and rolling hills and sheep in the background. And so, you know, that's a great pleasure to be in that environment. And so for those of us who live and work in the countryside, the lockdown was reasonably easy in comparison to many others. And although I enjoy visiting the city, I enjoy going to the theatre and, you know, the cinema and nice restaurants and shopping, I certainly wouldn't want to live in a town or a city. You know, living in the countryside is a great pleasure. And with our tourist enterprise, the Cotswold Farm Park, having it shut during the lockdown periods of last year and part of this year was very, very difficult for us, but a great joy being able to welcome people back into the countryside. And I think one thing that, that led to people being locked away was that craving for nature, understanding where our food comes from and the value of it, and understanding the countryside and food and farming, which we like to celebrate here, and I like to communicate about.
Definitely. So if we talk a bit about the farm park, and I guess one of the main aims would be education and hopefully creating a bit more of an attachment. I mean, I know there's the element of the rare breeds and things like that, but it's actually getting people just to a farm, seeing animals. But I feel like, and it's a shame to say, there is a detachment between the public and food production. Hopefully lockdown has probably pushed the whole British farming side of things a bit more. But why do you think there is a detachment? And I guess the detachment with food production does push into a detachment with what farmers are doing to the planet. And it's not as bad as it's made out, really.
Yeah, so there's a lot there to cover, but the detachment, that void has happened over a number of years. Obviously, post-World War, when we were a starving nation, we had food rations, and food security was a hot topic, and everybody understood the value of food. Very little was wasted because it was in such short demand, such short supply. And then there was a drive from the government for agriculturalists to put their foot on the accelerator for food production, which are plant breeders, animal breeders, veterinarians, farmers all did an amazing job at doing. And we then had a situation where farming was being subsidized to produce as much food as possible, ripping out dry stone walls and hedges and getting fields bigger, which the agricultural industry did an amazingly good job. We did it very well. We did it too well. So we then had to bring insecticide to reduce the amount of food we were producing. And the support schemes from government didn't keep up with the speed that farmers were acting. And supermarkets made food very, very readily available. There's a glut of food. Food became cheap, and our education and understanding of where that food had come from completely disappeared. And in certain, it's a sweeping statement, but in general, there's this huge void of knowledge now because food is so readily accessible. We don't understand the seasons. We can buy strawberries at Christmas. Food comes from all over the world, and we don't give it a thought when we pick it up off the shelves. And so whose fault is that? Maybe partly the farmer, maybe partly the government, maybe partly the supermarket, but we are where we are. So let's not point any fingers. What we need to do is bridge the gap and get over this. And so I think, in cities and towns now, and in society in general, from adults to children, this void of knowledge is something we've got to combat. We've got to get over. Because our one commonality is we all eat, and we all, and it's a great social event. It's very important for our health and well-being. If you talk to government, the health service is on its knees at the moment, and the last thing they want is unhealthy people because they're not eating properly. And starvation in the UK isn't as bad as obesity. They're both a problem, but we're not eating very healthily as a nation in general. And so that education about where our food comes from is absolutely essential. So I've been working with a company called Happily, and they're auditing the food supply chain and putting in a QR code and a stamp of approval so that it's completely truth and trust and traceability in the food supply chain. And one of the things we did was a campaign called Feed Me Truth. And we went to schools and met the cooks and the head teacher and the food procurement company. And we talked to the kids about, what was on their plates. And in a lot of instances, they haven't got a clue where things have come from. They don't know the potatoes come from the ground. They don't know how cheese is made.
Yeah.
And we took some sheep into a school north of Birmingham, fairly deprived area. They were supported to have breakfast and lunch in the school. And we took sheep into the assembly, and they went crazy. Lots of those kids had never, ever seen a sheep before.
Wow.
And that's in our society today. And a whole section of those children, when they came to school, had to be taught at 11, had to be taught how to use a knife and fork, as they eat at home. They don't have a kitchen table. They sit on their settee and they eat out of packets.
Yeah.
And so, you know, that's now, and which is a problem. So our educational department needs to do something about it. You know, Gavin Williamson was on the case, and our new education minister, I hope, you know, they're sorting it out now too.
Yeah, I think that's something that we're really, really passionate about, Becca and I. We want to go into schools. We want to be able to bridge that gap. And I think it's something that's been huge for me coming into the industry, so not from a farming background, is these almost misconceptions and the lack of education that I had on farming. So it was very much, you know, in schools, it was what sound does a cow make? And a huge thing that I think was kind of taught to me, and it's not because I'm ignorant, it's just because that's what I was brought up with, was this idea that farming and cows are basically to blame for climate change. You know, whether it was a science test, whether it was science in primary school, and it was the cow produces the methane is the problem for everything. And coming into the industry and talking to farmers and understanding actually what's going on, I realized that there is so much more to it than that. And I'd like to kind of enlighten people who listen who aren't from a farming background. What is it, I mean, are cows to blame? Is it farmers? Should we be doing more? You know, there is so much more to it, Adam. Please, can you help me on that one?
Yes, and you're, you know, clearly an intelligent person, and there will be hundreds of thousands of people like you who really don't understand agriculture at all. So, you know, things like this are really important, and we've got to try and get those messages out there. We don't need to explain it to farmers, we need to explain it to the general public, you know, the consumer that buy our products. Yeah. And the more we can persuade them to buy British, the better. And that's good for our agricultural industry and society as a whole, because there's that whole cyclical movement of money around the agricultural domain. And so when it comes to our climate impact, I'm no expert, but my understanding is that agriculture does have a huge impact on climate change and creates a lot of greenhouse gases. But when you compare that to transport and flights and those sorts of things, then it's relatively small.
Yeah.
And so 10% of our greenhouse gases in the UK, I understand, are caused by agriculture. And so the NFU want us to be net zero, so reduce that amount to net zero by 2030. The government's target is 2040. So the National Farmers Union is going 10 years ahead of that. So already farmers are starting to audit their carbon footprint. And so on this farm, we've done that. We've looked at all our fertilizer on the farm that we use, how that is causing greenhouse gases, the number of cattle and sheep and how much they burp and how much methane they produce. But then also, of course, on farms, we're growing things. And you would have learnt in biology about photosynthesis and how that sucks up CO2 and produces oxygen. And so all those green crops and green plants are sucking up carbon, the hedges, the trees, all those areas called carbon sequestration, sucking that down into the soil. And so there's a balance to be made. And on our farm, we're producing about 600 tons of carbon, which is the equivalent of a third of a jumbo jet flight to New York. So, and jumbo jets are flying to New York all the time. So this
is crazy. Like, I'm going to sound really stupid, but how do you even measure this? You know, like Becca talks about it on her farm, but for somebody who doesn't own a farm and is learning every single day, how do you measure your carbon footprint? Am I just stupid?
No, you're not stupid at all. And it's very, very complicated. And there's no exact science. And this is the problem.
Yeah.
In that, you know, we're being told to be net zero, but what does that actually mean? What are the measurements? What is that? There's no legislation in place. There's no particular lawful guidance on what that actually means. So there are plenty of companies out there now with carbon calculators that will come onto your farm and try and measure it for you. So we've been using a company called Trinity AgTech, and we help them develop their software called Sandy. And they're very, very good. They're right up there. I don't have any financial interest, so it's just a company that we worked with.
Yeah.
And they're working with AHDB. They've helped set up a sustainability school at Harper Adams. They're right on top of their game.
Right.
And because we all need to know, because of our responsibility. And although it's 10% of our greenhouse gases, in the UK, we're 60% better than most countries around the world. So we're already very, very green in comparison to others. But we still have the responsibility and more to do. The thing for farmers that is talk of the town and is in, Farmers Weekly and lots of other agricultural press is all about this transition to net zero, how we're going to get there, and what are the financial benefits. So there may be taxes put on cows, there may be taxes put on carbon, but there also is the opportunity to sell it. So you can sell carbon once you've measured it correctly. And as you say, once we've got through the Wild West out there and understand it fully, we will then be able to trade carbon to those who want to use it to offset some of the damage they're doing.
Right, okay.
And it also will then give you a higher value to your land potentially, because in the Cotswolds, my thin Cotswold brash won't store a lot of carbon, but peat or the Lincolnshire fens stores a huge amount.
Do you think farmers are going to open themselves up to kind of a massive risk factor if we don't know what's going to happen in the future, but if they sell their carbon too early before they've got an accurate picture and they sell it, market prices change, and then actually they end up being almost in a deficit themselves? And is that a worry?
Completely. Yes, absolutely, bang on. They need to have very, very lawfully binding contracts so that everybody understands how it's measured and what the payment scheme is and how that works. Because if suddenly you've agreed to something and you're getting paid for it, and then it turns out to be completely flawed and that company you're dealing with disappears, yes, it's a little bit like Bitcoin. There needs to be some serious legislation around it, because there are some of those types of virtual trading platforms that come and go. And so as farmers and business people, yes, I would err on the side of caution.
Definitely. So if we're talking about kind of sustainability, climate change, all of these topics, we probably have to slightly touch on COP26, which has had, let's say, mixed reactions, I guess. Some good has come out of it, some potentially questionable things as well. And one thing that Lizzie and I talked about was the plant-based croissant and the bacon sandwich. And that's, I'm not going to lie, probably the most read bit of media coming out of it, to be honest. And Lizzie said that she was shocked to actually see the differences in the carbon footprint. And again, Definitely. It's not through ignorance. Yeah, it's kind of through what you're surrounded with by the media and what we're told. So kind of what's your thoughts on that? Should we be a bit more transparent on what things, in labeling and packaging, and what did you take from, I guess, COP26 in general as well?
Yeah, so I think it's fantastic that the world leaders come together to talk about those sorts of things, and that there are some major conversations being had, because it is absolutely essential we sort it out and we all continue to do our bit. It's very easy, I think, for us to think about, China building a coal-powered power station every day, and so why am I bothering to recycle my milk bottles? I think we need to just all do our bit and not bury our head in the sand. And as business people, we all need to look at our businesses and what impact that has. So I think it's really hammered that home. That's a really good thing that came from it. Celebrities getting involved, David Attenborough saying his piece, royalty getting involved, there's it's really being shouted about. As far as the food goes, I agree, and I've quoted that in the past, about the croissant and the bacon sandwich. And so working with happily with this transparency thing. It's something that we've been talking about as well. And I've been having conversations with some supermarkets about it, who are thinking about putting a traffic light system on their food for its carbon impact.
Yeah.
And there's now a phrase, I don't know whether I've coined it or whether it's where it's come from, but there's now people who are called Climavores. So my wife, she's a vegetarian, and so is my daughter. My son and I are big meat eaters, so I don't care what people eat at all.
Yeah.
And you may choose not to eat meat because of health reasons. It may be because of ethical reasons that you don't want to use animals to produce food. Fine, that's absolutely fine if that's your train of thought. But there are other people that are choosing not to eat animals because of their carbon footprint. And so we need to completely understand what the carbon footprint is. Yeah. And on different farming systems, there'd be a different impact. So if you're grazing sheep on the top of the Brecon Beacons, where there's sphagnum moss and you've got a huge amount of carbon sequestration, they may be negative carbon impact. They might not be, but we need to measure it and understand it. Whereas if you're eating avocados or almonds and think you're doing a good thing because you're eating plant-based products, you're probably not. That might be a lot worse, hence the croissant and the bacon sandwich. Yeah. And so I think we need to do those, calculations, and we need to be climavores. We need to look at what's on our plate and think, what is the impact that I'm having on the planet from what I'm eating? And we need to do that nationally, but also internationally. The complicated thing is making sure the measurements are absolutely right, because it is incredibly complicated.
I think that's so important because, you get people looking at labels now, consumers, whether it's, your free range eggs or British. And I think consumers really take notice of labels. And I think you've got a lot of adverts now, whether it's supermarkets or whether it's just the media in general, that are saying, cut down on meat, or you should be eating a more of a plant-based diet. And again, I agree with you. It doesn't matter what you want to eat if you've got ethical reasons for it, if you do want to eat meat or don't. But I think we need to be educated on actually what is the impact, because I didn't know before I came into agriculture the problems with avocados, for instance. It was an Instagram thing. You got to have that with your poached egg on toast.
And you're absolutely right, yes. And so a lot of us don't, do we? And we're in the world where we're talking to people who produce food all the time. And so it's really interesting stuff. And so we need to be able to measure it, and we need to understand it, and we need to think really carefully about what we eat. And none of us are in a position to bang on arguing one way or the other until we know the facts, until we know the science. And so maybe we should be eating less beef. Maybe we should be eating less dairy. Those cows do burp, they do create methane, and they do create greenhouse gases. But it depends what you're going to replace that with. Yeah. So if you're choosing not to eat dairy products, not have milk on your cornflakes, and you're choosing a plant-based replacement, think really carefully what that is. I would urge oat milk over almond milk. But that's just me. I don't know the science behind that, but that's what we need to learn. It is a minefield. And I think farmers are very protective of what we do, and sometimes a little bit belligerent about it. I think we need to be completely open-minded, listen to the people who are pointing the finger at us, and come up with really well-founded, sensible arguments with science to back it up. And so people like ABP, huge meat procurement company, I've been doing some podcasts with them, talking to some really good people looking at sustainability. And, so a big meat procurement company are right on it. They're doing scientific trials on farms. They've got Jude Capper in Harper Adams, head of sustainability. All these people, big industry leaders, Arla in the milk world, are all doing the work to try and get on top of the science, which is great. We often turn to government for support and guidance and all the rest of it. But actually, I think it needs to come from the public sector. It'll happen a lot quicker, and it'll be a lot better funded. And so we need to sort these things out ourselves, I think.
Yeah, I think that's something you've definitely been looking at on your farm, isn't it, Bex? The kind of looking forward, what can you do as part of the next generation?
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point as well, because sometimes I like the idea of things not coming from government, as bad as that sounds, because I think they sometimes have actually the wrong perspective of farmers. You talk about, I don't know, maybe, regenerative farming and things like that. We've been doing that for years. Farmers in general have, we as an individual farm have been doing it. And you think, gosh, do they really think we're doing that bad a job that we haven't thought about some hedges or things like that? And the other thing about regenerative farming is if we aren't doing that with a wide rotation and getting livestock involved and, cover crops and break crops, we won't do a very good job of the farm. Selfishly, we won't make any money whatsoever if we're not doing those things already. So yeah, I love the idea of things coming from maybe people a bit more hands-on, people who are more invested in the sector, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. That's definitely the way things should be going. And I think you're right. My generation, your generation, and have farming has changed a huge amount more towards conservation. There's loads of schemes out there now, countryside stewardship schemes and higher level stewardship schemes that many of us are involved with. And we perhaps haven't publicised that we're doing them enough, so that the public can understand it. And it should perhaps be on labelling more. But marketing is an incredibly powerful tool, and it is all about selling. It's why we've got these amazing marketeers around the world selling things. And so I heard a talk once, and this guy was saying there's a drink that's black and it can rot your teeth, and it can cause diabetes, and we don't really know what's in it, but it's got one of the biggest marketing budgets in the world. And then there's another drink that's white and it's really good for your teeth and it's got good for your bones, and it comes from a sustainable source, but it doesn't have a very good marketing budget. And one sells for a fortune and one doesn't. And so, it's that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's a massive point. And I guess I, coming from a farming background and Lizzie not, I learned stuff about marketing from Lizzie day in, day out. And I think sometimes you forget it's a two-way process. We can all learn from each other. Farmers, if we open ourselves up to the marketing side, the technology, we can strengthen ourselves by drawing on it, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, food production and technology can work very well side by side, working out how efficient our machines are. Precision farming, timeliness and accuracy is absolutely everything. We work on set tram lines and work with satellite guidance and variable rate seeding and variable rate fertilizing, measuring the nutrients in the soil, all the things that I'm sure you do on your farm, and then also working really closely with conservation and wildlife. And those good quality food production can work alongside conservation, in my mind. As farmers, we're food producers, but also conservationists. And you're absolutely right, Becca. If we're not doing those things well, then we probably haven't got a very sustainable business.
So if we combine the arable side of the farm with the livestock, how would you say on your farm at home, how the animals aid sustainability? And I guess this is almost a simplification in one sentence, almost two sentences. What do they do? What would you tell the public that the animals do for your farm?
Yeah, so it would be like turning the clock back and going into a more rotational farming system where the animals bring manure and fertility to the ground, and the crops that they graze would be clover and chicory and those sorts of plants that suck up carbon from the atmosphere and then put that back into the soil to feed the following crop, but also to alleviate any methane that those animals are exuding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think sorry, go on, Beth. No, I was jumping into it. I've been to your farm, Adam, and it is beautiful, picturesque. It is fantastic. You can feel when the public are there, they're just so happy. Everybody comes together. And obviously you do have some recognizable rare breeds, which is amazing. And I'm sure, when I was there, it was fantastic. But I'm sure that a lot of your visitors love the rare breeds. Is there anyone in particular that they're the most excited about? And why is it important for sustainability to preserve the breeds?
Yeah, so for rare breeds conservation, and the reason my dad got into it to start off with and opened the farm park in 1971, and then was founder chairman of the Rare Breed Survival Trust that look after British rare and native breeds nationally in 1973. We were losing breeds before that, but they were becoming extinct because we were streamlining agriculture. We haven't lost any since its formation. And the reason we need them is not just because they're part of our living heritage, that's important, but the most important thing is that they have a genetic resource that we might want to call upon in the future. So it might be that they can survive up on top of a mountain, or they've got incredibly hard feet, or they're amazing maternal instincts, or very thick skin to live outdoors all winter, or whatever it might be. And so we've got a huge range of diversity in our livestock in the UK to call upon for the future and the directions we want to go in. So that's the reason to conserve and preserve them. But on the farm park, yes, for us, it is about people having fun and learning. I don't know about you, but those lessons I was in at school, if I had a good time, those are the ones I went away and I said, I've learned something in there. Even that, it's about having fun and enjoying yourself as well as taking those messages away. So we've got Prince, our Black Highland bull, who's a real character, our Lexi, our Suffolk Punch mare with her beautiful foal, Braveheart. Lots of characters, Edith the pig, we've got Strawberry the cow, all these animals that children ask their parents to bring them back to have another look at them. And I love that. And I love the interaction of people getting up close to animals. And we usually, when COVID allowing, lamb all our ewes in our lambing shed in front of the public and tell them all about
fab.
it. And that, that birth and learning about the birds and bees is really important, but also learning that those animals, and we don't shy away from it, will be going to eat, they're for the table. And if we have a ewe that's in difficulty and we have a lamb that's stillborn, we just explain what's going on. And I think that honesty of the real life that we live is so important. There's so much going on, particularly in children's lives, that's virtual, that's on a screen, that isn't real. And I think that tangible, get up close, smell, listen, hear, touch is really important in my mind.
Yeah. So obviously the public are crucial to, one, your farm and the kind of success of it as a tourism attraction, but they're crucial to the success of farming in general. And I know that you're working really closely with wildlife and conservation, but if any of our listeners are at home thinking, what can I do? What's a small impact I can make in the bit of space I have? What would you say they can do on the wildlife element?
Yeah, so I think learn about it. So, if you live in a flat and you don't have the opportunity to have any green spaces at all, you can have a little window box. You can hang on your window and plant things in it, and you can get micro herbs and plant flowers, and even those little tiny things all help. But when you're out walking, in the park, which all of our towns and cities have, look at the birds and think about what they are. Look at the trees, look at the insects, can you name them? Do you know them? Just try and be more engaged with the environment around you, rather than walking around staring at your phone or,
we are really disconnected, because really disconnected.
I live in the countryside and I can't name all the trees, and I'm embarrassed that I can't. I'm no botanist, but I have an app on my phone. So if I see a plant that I don't know what it is, I take a photo and it comes up on my phone what it is. And
that's clever. I didn't even think of that.
It might be a mushroom of some description, some kind of fungus, or it might be a plant, or it might be an insect. And so you can, look and learn.
Definitely. And I think that is such a good way. We'll have our phones with us everywhere we go, but use that for, as opposed to, mindlessly scrolling on things. Don't get me wrong, you can learn stuff from social media, as we're trying to do, but use it for, the other side of things and a bit of education as well. I think that's, such a good idea. But we're going to come to our final question, which we do ask all our guests. And I'm not sure where we are in the leaderboard, Lizzie, but I think you're probably winning. So I'm crossing my fingers, Adam, that you're going to be a Team Boots kind of a person. But then the problem is you're very much in the limelight as well. So
on the TV media. So are you Team Heels?
I can't call this one.
Are you Team
Boots?
Am
I boots or am I heels?
Yeah.
Oh, crikey, that is a really, really difficult one.
Forget these climate change questions. They're nothing.
Yeah.
No, well, I'm definitely a country boy, born and bred. And I'm never happier than when I'm in my wellies out on the farm. But I do like a bit of shopping, and I do quite like, buying some nice, I'm a bit of a label victim. So I do like like a bit of fashion, but I'll go with the wellies.
Oh, yes,
that makes us even. Fair dues. You'll be happy, Bet.
I'm definitely happy.
Oh, thank you so much for today, Adam. It's been amazing to speak to you and to learn more. It's just always about learning. I'm learning every day. Becca learns from me. I learn from her. And to have guests like you, it just gets the message further. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
It's a pleasure. Thank you, Becca. Thank you, Lizzie. Every day's a school day.
Every day.
It is. Thank you. Well, that really was fantastic. I think Adam just sums up in a really accessible, quite a simple way, what cows really are doing. And maybe it's not as bad as we all think.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go to the, is it GCSE still, or it's not O levels? That's back in.
That's back in the day.
Back in the day. GCSEs, maybe we should have a chat there and see if we can add some new questions. And again, thank you so much to everybody who has left us a review. If you subscribe, it means the world to us. It means we can get our message out there further. And we do have episode 5 available next week, Saturday, 9 a.m. Join us here. Thanks again. Bye.
Bye.